Hello and good day and welcome to the Polyglot Bookshelf. This is my channel where I talk about books in multiple languages. Who knows what language I'll talk about next, though mostly it'll be Portuguese because that's my L2, my second language, and my third and fourth languages are not strong enough that I'm reading much in the way of high-level literature, though I will be talking about some books in Spanish very soon, and maybe even some really basic books in Chinese, just to talk about lower level languages and the stuff I'm reading in them. So the idea behind this channel is quite simple. A lot of the polyglots online have talked about on their channels using reading and using books to improve your second language. But I want to create a channel to talk about the books that are worth learning other languages in order to read and have access to. And on that subject, this week is the 40-hour, 7-day language challenge, where polyglots attempt to do 40 hours of language learning in a week. Just like it's a full-time job, which might sound like a horrible way to ruin your hobby, but it's actually a lot of fun. In part because what people who are not polyglots don't seem to realize is when we talk about studying a language, everybody else has the image of somebody sitting at a desk with a big textbook and struggling really hard to figure out some fine points of grammar, and I'm sure that does not sound like a whole lot of fun. And luckily, that is not what most polyglots do with their language learning time. There is a certain amount of study to go into just about any language because you got to know some of the grammar eventually, otherwise nothing makes sense. But most polyglots prefer to focus on things like immersion, which often means watching TV in your target language, which once you get to a certain point in the language is basically watching TV. So you can count that as study time, which is exactly what I've been doing. I've been watching a program on RTP that I really like and getting a lot out of it, both in terms of enjoyment and in terms of language learning. And this afternoon, I took the afternoon off and I went to a park and I read a book for 2 hours. And that was Portuguese learning. So the book I was reading was called Salvação. And I finished it. I returned it to the library and got some new books. And I want to talk about Salvação before I forget, because it's actually a really wonderful book. Salvação is by Ana Cristina Silva. And it's 2 stories in one, so it's kind of like a double bonus. It's a good example of, I guess, what we would call popular literature. I don't really know what other genre to call it. The 2 stories, so the first story is about a man whose wife has passed away from cancer, and he is absolutely tormented and going through some horrible depression, because he just never expected that she was going to die. He says several times, there's kind of profound parts of the book where he talks about, we always think about our own death, but we never think about our partners dying and us being left alone. We think that's not what we think about when we think about our death. So it's a very good story, but what makes it so fascinating is his wife's dying words to him is to tell him to write a book because it will be his salvation. And so he's trying to write a book. And the second story that's told in intermediate chapters, so one chapter is the story of this man, and the second chapter is the book that he's writing. And I think that's a really interesting way to go about telling a story. And the story he's writing is about a Jewish doctor during the Inquisition, David Negro, and that is also a very fascinating story. David that is a pseudonym because his wife is killed by the Inquisition his daughter is taken and given to an elderly Christian woman to be raised as a Christian so that she won't have to face the persecution. And the doctor has to flee Portugal and ends up in Germany for a while. Well, France, Germany, and then finally in the Netherlands, where he is now very elderly and writing to his daughter that he's just recently discovered who she is and where she's at in Portugal to try to explain his life. And so, two absolutely fascinating stories in one, and I highly, highly recommend it. It is not the most simple Portuguese, but not the most complicated either. Like, when you first start reading in a second language, you probably want to read stuff that is kind of meant for mass consumption. And I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way, but most popular genres like romances and detective stories and all of these are written in English. The industry standard is about an 8th grade level. And I would guess it's about the same here. That's written, for high school students, or more accurately, it's written for people who got through high school and haven't really formally studied since then, and they're perfectly capable of reading, but they're not interested in reading at something that's very, very difficult. So the nice kind of trashy escapism fantasies that we look for in a lot of our popular genres are language-wise like intermediate, like a B1, B2 kind of level. You can usually approach those without a lot of trouble. This is maybe just a little bit harder than that. There were some words, especially in the second story, because of its setting and time period, that I had to look up, but it really was not super difficult. And so if you have decent Portuguese, I definitely recommend giving it a try. And I think that's all I have for today. This has been kind of an unscripted video, so we'll see how it goes. And if you like it, give me a thumbs up or, subscribe to the channel. And if nobody's watching this, then I'm screaming at the void. And I guess that's okay too, because it's better than screaming at the wall. So that's my story for today. You guys have a good day and see you next time.